Sailor finds K9 German Shepherd swimming, 137 miles offshore. Then, something shocking happens. A lone sailor drifting across the Gulf of Mexico spotted something no one could ever expect. A German Shepherd swimming alone in the vast open sea. No land in sight, no boat nearby. Just a dog, paddling with desperate determination, nearly 220 kilometers from shore. Everyone said it was impossible. Everyone said no dog could survive that far out. But what happened after the sailor pulled the K9 on board will leave you speechless. This isn't just a story of survival. It's a miracle that will redefine what you believe about loyalty, courage, and fate. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of our heart-pounding emotional stories that celebrate resilience and the incredible bond between humans and animals. Now, let's dive into one of the most unbelievable rescues the ocean has ever witnessed. The waves had been calm that morning. Captain Elijah Brooks, a 39-year-old Navy veteran turned deep-sea fisherman, was on his 4th day alone at sea. He liked the solitude, the hum of the engine, the endless blue stretching to the horizon, and the salty wind brushing against his weathered face. It all gave him peace. After serving 2 decades in the Navy, there weren't many places that still felt like home. But the open ocean, that was different. His boat, the Odessa, floated silently in the middle of nowhere, roughly 137 miles south of the Louisiana coastline. Elijah had turned off the motor, letting the boat drift while he enjoyed his morning coffee. The sun shimmered on the water like scattered diamonds. He was about to head inside when something in the distance caught his eye. At first, he thought it was driftwood, a small dark shape bobbing in and out of the waves. Then it moved, intentionally, slowly, deliberately. "What the hell?" Elijah muttered, squinting against the glare. He grabbed his binoculars from the console and focused in. That's when his heart skipped. It was a dog, a German Shepherd, and it was swimming, paddling with just its front legs, head barely above the surface, its eyes fixed forward, driven by something Elijah couldn't yet understand. He dropped the binoculars and kicked the engine into gear. The boat surged forward as he steered toward the unthinkable. He didn't question how or why. His instincts kicked in. Years in the Navy had taught him that hesitation could cost a life, and there was no way he was letting that dog drown, not on his watch. As he got closer, Elijah could see the animal's strength fading. The shepherd's strokes were slowing. Its snout dipped below the surface now and then, and a soft whimper carried over the water. "Hold on, buddy," Elijah said under his breath. "I've got you." He reached the dog in minutes, cut the engine, and tossed a life ring into the water. But the shepherd didn't react. It just floated there, shivering, eyes barely open. Without thinking twice, Elijah grabbed the boat hook, hooked the ring under the dog's torso, and slowly dragged it to the side of the boat. He knelt down, straining with effort, as he lifted the soaking wet animal out of the water. It was heavier than expected, solid muscle under soaked fur, and limp with exhaustion. He laid the dog gently on the deck. It didn't move, just trembled. Elijah knelt beside it, placing a hand on its side. The dog was breathing, shallow but steady. Its fur was slick with salt, its paws raw and red, nails chipped. A black collar clung to its neck, too tight now that the dog's body was swollen from the ordeal, and on the collar was a rusted, scratched tag that caught the sunlight. K9 Unit, Rex Serial, Number A4201, U.S. military property. Elijah froze. This wasn't just a stray. This was a military working dog. "What happened to you?" he whispered, brushing the shepherd's ear back gently. The dog opened one eye and let out a soft, almost imperceptible sound. Not a growl, not a bark, just a breath of presence, a whisper of trust. Elijah sat back, stunned. Out here, in the middle of the ocean, how could a military canine be swimming alone? The questions buzzed in his mind like static. Was there a wreck? A mission gone wrong? A chopper crash? And why hadn't the military sent anyone out here looking? He didn't know it yet, but the answers would lead Elijah down a path more dangerous and emotional than anything he faced in combat. Because this dog, Rex, hadn't just survived the impossible. He was carrying a secret. And the moment Elijah pulled him from the water, that secret became his, too. Elijah hadn't seen a military tag like that in years. Holding it in his fingers, rusted and nearly unreadable, stirred something deep in his chest. Memories of missions, comrades, and commands barked under gunfire. But this wasn't a war zone. This was his boat, his safe place. And now, lying limp on the deck, was a war dog that should have never been in this part of the ocean. As the sun began to lower into the Gulf, casting everything in a bruised orange light, Elijah got to work. He wrapped the dog, Rex, in an Old Navy blanket and carried him into the cabin. The air inside was cool, and the space smelled of salt, diesel, and old coffee grounds. He laid Rex down gently on a padded bench and opened the first aid kit. He cleaned the dog's raw paws first. Each time the antiseptic touched the open wounds, Rex twitched, but never growled. He didn't have the strength. Elijah looked into his eyes and saw something broken. Not just physically, but something deeper. It reminded him of the eyes he saw in wounded soldiers who'd watched too much, lost too much. "Don't worry," Elijah whispered, wrapping a bandage around one of the paws. "You're safe now. You're gonna be all right." Rex let out a long, low exhale. Maybe it was relief. Maybe it was trust. By nightfall, Rex was sleeping. Shallow breaths, occasional whimpers. Elijah stayed close, checking his pulse, watching his chest rise and fall. He tried to piece it together. Dogs didn't just fall out of the sky, and no military mission had been reported missing. At least none he'd heard on the radio. He turned on his shortwave, searching for news. Static, fishing reports, weather alerts. Then something strange. Unconfirmed reports of a downed helicopter off the coast of static, classified operation. No survivors found. Elijah leaned closer. The voice was distant, crackling, but the pieces were forming. A chopper had gone down. No survivors. And if Rex had been on board... "Jesus," he muttered. "You swam all this way?" He looked at the dog again, now curled up, the blanket pulled around him like a child. How far had Rex gone? Dozens of miles? More? How long had he been paddling through the merciless sea, holding on to whatever scraps of training or instinct he had left? Elijah poured himself a mug of coffee and sat beside the bench, eyes never leaving the shepherd. And then Rex stirred. Not just a twitch, a sudden jerk. His legs moved in short bursts, his breathing quickened. He let out a muffled, throaty growl, eyes still shut, caught in something between sleep and memory. "Hey," Elijah said gently, reaching out. "You're all right, soldier. It's just a dream." Rex's eyes snapped open. Wide, wild, and in a blur of motion, he lunged. Elijah was quick. He'd dealt with K9s before, trained with them, even feared them once. He rolled back just in time as Rex sprang to his feet, back arched, teeth bared, growling from deep in his gut. "Easy," Elijah held out both hands. "Easy, boy. It's me. It's me." Rex stood frozen, panting, tail low, ears pinned back. That's when Elijah saw it. The scar on his chest. Jagged, recent, and likely from shrapnel. And above it, a faded tattoo inked into the dog's skin beneath the fur. Project Sentinel. Elijah's heart sank. He knew that name. It wasn't public knowledge, not even close. But whispers about Project Sentinel had circled through the military underground for years. Unofficial, off the record. A specialized unit of dogs trained for missions no human could endure. Some called them weapons. Others called them victims. And if Rex was one of them, he hadn't just survived. He had escaped. Elijah lowered his voice. What did they do to you? Rex stood still, the tension draining from his body. Slowly he lowered his head, as if remembering something, as if hearing a command only he could understand. Then, without a word, he stepped forward and rested his head gently on Elijah's knee. That was when Elijah made his decision. He wasn't going to turn Rex in. Not yet. Not until he knew the full truth. And not until he was sure the people who sent this dog to die wouldn't try to take him back. The morning came in slow gray layers like a curtain that didn't want to rise. Elijah hadn't slept. He sat by the bench all night, coffee long gone cold in his hand. One eye on the horizon, the other on Rex. The dog had finally dozed off again, curled at Elijah's feet now, his breathing steady. But there was something different in the air. Not the usual sea breeze. It was heavier, like the sky was holding its breath. Elijah stood and stretched, joints popping. He stepped onto the deck, barefoot, and scanned the endless blue. The Gulf looked calm, but he knew better. The ocean was never truly calm. Just like men who'd seen war, silence didn't mean peace. He walked back inside and gently woke Rex with a whisper. The dog lifted his head, but didn't bark, didn't panic. He simply blinked slowly, as if testing reality. "Morning, soldier," Elijah said softly. "Time to eat." He opened a can of tuna. It was all he had that wouldn't upset Rex's stomach, and poured fresh water into a metal bowl. The shepherd ate in silence, licking every last drop. Elijah watched his movements, controlled, precise, even in exhaustion. This dog had been trained to survive. No wasted energy, no unnecessary sounds. Everything was instinct and calculation. After breakfast, Elijah carefully removed the old collar. It had left a red mark on Rex's neck. The tag still hung from it. K9 Unit Rex. But the name felt too cold now, too formal. "You need a new name," Elijah muttered. "Something that doesn't come with orders or numbers." Rex tilted his head. Elijah smiled. "But we'll get to that later." He powered up the radio again, tuning through frequencies. Static, traffic reports. Finally, a snippet. Still no official statement from the Department of Defense. Crash remains classified. Rumors of unauthorized retrievals. He turned it off. They were hiding something. He felt it in his bones. And he was now holding the proof. Breathing, recovering, staring at him with intelligent brown eyes. The day passed slowly. Elijah spent the afternoon cleaning the wound on Rex's chest. It wasn't infected, not yet, but it needed proper treatment. He wrapped it again, tighter this time. Rex flinched, but never pulled away. "You're tough, huh?" Elijah murmured. The dog looked at him. Not just a glance, a deep, measuring gaze. It was the kind of look that didn't come from a pet, but from something more aware. And then it happened. As the sun dipped into the horizon, casting long golden rays across the water, Elijah noticed a shape on the edge of the radar. A boat. Unmarked. Approaching slowly. He squinted, adjusting the scope on his binoculars. It wasn't a fishing vessel, too sleek, too quiet. No name painted on the side. No visible crew on the deck. Elijah's gut twisted. He walked back into the cabin and closed the door behind him. "Rex," he said, his voice low. "We've got company." The dog perked up immediately, ears alert. Elijah crouched beside him. "I think they're here for you." Rex didn't growl. He didn't whimper. Instead, he walked to the cabin door and sat beside it, straight-backed, tail curled around his side. He was ready, trained, waiting for a command. Elijah checked his flare gun, then locked the radio's secure channel. The unmarked boat was now visible with the naked eye, still at a distance, but circling slowly. He didn't know who they were. Black ops? Private contractors? Government cleanup crew? But one thing was clear. They weren't coming to rescue the dog. They were coming to erase him. And Elijah, he wasn't about to let that happen. Elijah had seen enough in his Navy years to know when something didn't feel right. And that unmarked boat, moving in slow circles off his starboard side, was a textbook red flag. They weren't here by accident. Not this far offshore. Not with that kind of silence. He grabbed his binoculars again and focused on the vessel. Matte gray hull. No flag. No registration numbers. 2 men on deck, both wearing black tactical gear and dark sunglasses, even as the sun was setting. One of them held a long object casually at his side. Not a fishing rod, something heavier. "A rifle," Elijah muttered, jaw tightening. Inside the cabin, Rex didn't bark, but his body was coiled like a spring waiting for release. His ears flicked at every creak of the boat. Elijah could see it in his stance. Rex wasn't afraid. He was calculating. Elijah paced the deck for a moment, trying to think. He wasn't armed for a gunfight. All he had was a flare gun, a rusted signal horn, and a well-stocked toolbox. But he wasn't about to hand the dog over. Not after pulling him out of the ocean. Not after seeing the pain behind those intelligent eyes. He reached for the VHF radio and called out on Channel 16, the emergency frequency. "Unidentified vessel off my port side," he said clearly. "This is the fishing vessel Odessa. Identify yourself." Silence. He repeated the call. Still nothing. Then the boat began to move again, not away, but toward him. Slowly, deliberately. Elijah took a deep breath and turned to Rex. "If this goes bad, you hide. You understand? I'll buy us time." But Rex didn't move. He looked at Elijah with steady eyes and let out a soft, almost inaudible growl. Not at Elijah, but at the danger outside, like he was saying, "I've come too far to run now." The unmarked boat was within shouting distance when a voice finally rang out over a loudspeaker. Male, flat, commanding. "We're here for the animal. Hand it over, and nobody gets hurt." Elijah stepped forward. "This dog is injured and under my care. Identify your agency. That animal is government property. You're interfering with a federal matter. Last warning." Elijah's blood boiled. He had been government property once too. Sent into places no one talked about. Left to deal with ghosts and guilt no one else wanted. And now they were doing the same thing to a dog. He looked back at Rex, who stood beside him on the deck now, silent and alert. Elijah didn't blink. "Then you'd better come take him." There was a pause. The man on the other boat raised a hand. A signal. Elijah stepped back, preparing for whatever came next. But then, something unexpected happened. Rex moved to the edge of the deck, locked eyes with the men across the water, and barked once, loud, clear, commanding. The effect was instant. The 2 men on the other boat paused. One of them took a step back. The other muttered something into a radio clipped to his shoulder. Then the boat engines kicked in, and they turned away. Just like that. Gone. Elijah stood there, stunned, watching the vessel disappear into the dusky horizon. "What the hell just happened?" he asked aloud. Rex returned to his side and sat calmly, as if nothing had happened at all. Elijah knelt beside him, rubbing behind his ears. "They were afraid of you." Rex looked up at him, panting gently. And that's when Elijah understood. Whatever Project Sentinel was, whatever training they'd done, Rex wasn't just another K9, he had authority. Recognition. Maybe even ranking. The men on that boat weren't just hunting a runaway. They were afraid of what he knew. Elijah exhaled slowly and looked out into the darkening sea. He realized this wasn't over. That boat would be back. Maybe not today, maybe not even this week, but someone out there wanted Rex silenced, and they wouldn't stop until he was. He turned back to the dog beside him. "Well, partner," he said softly, "looks like we're in this together." And for the first time since he'd pulled him from the water, Rex wagged his tail. Elijah couldn't sleep. After the mysterious boat turned away, the silence felt more suffocating than ever. It wasn't peace. It was pressure. The kind that built just before the storm. Rex lay by the cabin door, half asleep but alert. His ears twitched with every creak of the boat, every slap of water against the hull. He didn't trust the quiet. Neither did Elijah. He sipped cold coffee, staring out the small porthole. Something about the encounter gnawed at him. Why hadn't those men forced the issue? They could have boarded. They were armed. But they'd turned away. After Rex barked. Like they recognized him. Not as a threat, as a command. Elijah set the cup down and opened the cabin drawer. Inside was an old USB drive. Weatherproof, encrypted, military grade. He hadn't used it since his last classified mission. But now, something told him to check Rex's collar again. He retrieved the black collar from the storage shelf and flipped it over. He'd missed it before. A small metal seam barely visible under the leather. He slipped a screwdriver under the edge and pried it open. Click. Inside, taped tightly and sealed in plastic, was a tiny microchip card. No label, no serial number, just a flat, black surface. Elijah's heart pounded. He booted up his old laptop, one he hadn't touched in years. It was slow, dusty, but still worked. He slid the chip into the adapter and connected it. For a moment, nothing. Then the screen flickered, and a file opened. Project Sentinel. Phase 3. Neural Response Conditioning Canine Variant. Below the title was a video. Elijah clicked play. A recording began. Grainy, time-stamped 4 months ago. A military lab. White walls, fluorescent lights. A German Shepherd strapped to a padded table was being observed by 3 men in military uniforms and lab coats. Elijah's stomach turned. It was Rex. Only younger, healthier. But his eyes were the same. A voice spoke off camera. Subject A4201 has demonstrated exceptional retention and response accuracy under extreme duress. Unlike previous test dogs, this one forms emotional bonds slower. But once bonded, the protection instincts are nearly unbreakable. The man leaned into frame. A high-ranking officer Elijah recognized from his years in the Navy. Colonel Darrell Crane, a ghost from the past. "We've pushed him past standard thresholds," Crane continued. Under simulated drownings, exposure to loud fire, even loss of oxygen, he survived every single one. Elijah paused the video. He couldn't breathe. They hadn't just trained Rex, they'd tortured him, conditioned him to survive things no living creature should, all in the name of building the perfect military weapon. Elijah looked over at Rex, who now stood at his side, sensing something was wrong. The dog placed one paw gently on his leg and let out a low, questioning whine. Elijah met his gaze. "You weren't just escaping a crash. You were escaping them. Rex blinked once, then laid his head against Elijah's knee. It all made sense now. The secrecy, the strange behavior, the scar on his chest, and the reason the men on that unmarked boat didn't force the retrieval. Because Rex didn't just carry secrets. He was the secret. Elijah clicked through the rest of the files. Videos, audio recordings, and internal memos about something called Phase 4, referencing autonomous behavior, emotional targeting, and field testing in covert environments. One note even mentioned termination protocol if subject compromises operational secrecy. They'd sent Rex on a mission, and when it went wrong, he became a liability. Disposable. Elijah sat back in the chair, eyes stinging. You were never meant to come back, were you? Rex didn't move, but his silence spoke volumes. A deep, fierce anger rose in Elijah's chest. He had seen betrayal in uniform before. Good men used and discarded. But this was something else. They had used this dog like a machine, and now that he'd escaped, they wanted him gone. Like wiping a file off a hard drive. No. Not this time. Elijah reached for the microchip, yanked it from the laptop, and crushed it under his boot. Sparks hissed, data lost forever. He stood, looked down at Rex, and nodded once. They won't find you again. Not through that. The dog lifted his head. We're not just surviving anymore, Elijah said quietly. We're fighting back. And in the stillness of that small cabin, two soldiers, one man, one dog, began planning their next move. Elijah had never considered himself a man who ran from things. Not in combat, not in life. But that night, with Rex curled at his feet and a crushed microchip in the trash, he realized something deeper. Sometimes survival wasn't about running. It was about choosing where to stand. The Odessa cut through the waves under a blanket of stars, heading north toward the Louisiana coast. Elijah had turned off every tracking system, powered down the radio, and disabled the AIS transponder. The boat was invisible to satellites and sea traffic. He wasn't taking chances. Rex remained quiet beside him in the cabin. No barking, no pacing. Just that unshakable calm, like he knew the storm had passed, but not the war. We're not going back to the base, Elijah said softly, one hand on the wheel. We're going somewhere they won't think to look. You need rest. You need peace. I think I do too. He wasn't sure what had made him say that last part aloud, but it felt honest. After 30 hours at sea, they pulled into a hidden inlet, tucked behind an abandoned shrimp dock. It was a place Elijah had visited once, years ago, during a hurricane relief operation. No cameras, no streetlights, just old wood, thick moss, and the whisper of cicadas under the moonlight. Elijah tied off the boat, grabbed his duffel, and whistled once. Rex followed without hesitation, limping slightly but steady. The two moved through the tree line and followed a gravel path until a small weathered cabin came into view. It had no running water, no electricity, and no cell signal. But it was his. Bought it 5 years ago. Never used it. Just a backup plan in case he ever needed to disappear. Now, it wasn't just his refuge. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. Dust danced in the air. The wooden floor creaked under their weight. Elijah dropped the bag, lit a kerosene lamp, and looked around. No frills, no comforts, but safe. He turned to Rex. It's not much, but we're free here. The dog walked a few feet, sniffed around the edges of the room, then circled a corner and lay down near the fireplace, sighing as if he'd been waiting to do that for years. Elijah smiled faintly. You like it, huh? No response. Just that peaceful stillness. For the next few days, they settled into a rhythm. Elijah fixed up the cabin, hunting small game for food, repairing broken floorboards, and reinforcing the door. He gave Rex sponge baths with warm water and herbs, made bandages from ripped flannel shirts, and even whittled him a new wooden name tag. Rex, free dog. Rex, in return, watched everything, protected the cabin at night, never left Elijah's side. The bond between them deepened without words. It was built in silence, the kind of silence that understood loss, pain, and the quiet miracle of survival. But even in peace, some ghosts don't rest. One night, as Elijah sat carving by the fire, Rex suddenly stood, rigid, ears high, eyes locked on the front door. Elijah reached for his knife instinctively. "Someone's here?" he whispered. A crack outside. Footsteps. Then, a soft knock. Not aggressive, not military. Elijah stepped slowly to the door, heart racing. He opened it cautiously. A woman stood there, late 30s, windblown hair, military bearing, a familiar patch on her jacket, veterinary corps. "Elijah Brooks?" she asked gently. He didn't answer, just stared. "I'm not here to take him," she added quickly. "I'm here because I trained him, years ago, before they turned the program into whatever it became." Elijah glanced back at Rex. The shepherd had approached silently and now stood at his side. The woman knelt, eyes tearing up. "Rex, you remember me?" Rex paused, then took one step forward, and then, in a moment so human it hurt, he leaned his head into her chest. She broke into quiet sobs. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know what they'd do to you. I thought they'd retired you." Elijah felt the knot in his chest loosen. She looked up. "They're not chasing him anymore. Too much attention. Someone leaked a report. Maybe you? Maybe not. Either way, he's safe. For now." Elijah nodded slowly. "He stays with me." "I hoped you'd say that." She stood, wiping her tears. "Take care of each other." And just like that, she was gone, swallowed by the woods. Elijah closed the door. Rex sat beside him, tail thumping once against the floor. For the first time since pulling him from the sea, Elijah believed this dog wasn't just surviving anymore. He was healing. 2 months passed. The Gulf was now a distant memory. A dream Elijah replayed only when the nights were too still. The cabin had become more than shelter. It was a space carved out of chaos. A place where two souls, both lost in their own way, had come to start over. Rex was stronger now. His fur had grown back in the places where scars once marked him. The limp was almost gone. And his eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes, no longer held the pain of survival. They held curiosity, even peace. Each morning, they hiked the moss-covered trails near the lake, the sun peeking through the pines. Rex walked without a leash. He didn't need one. Wherever Elijah went, he followed. Not as a subordinate, as a companion. And Elijah, he'd found something he didn't know. He was missing a reason to breathe deeper, to slow down, to care again. One evening, as the orange sun melted behind the trees, Elijah sat on the porch, carving another tag from wood. This one was different. On it, he etched just a single word: home. He smiled and looked down at Rex, lying peacefully beside his chair. "You know," he said, running his thumb across the carving, "I used to think home was where you go when the mission ends, but I think maybe it's where you stop running." Rex looked up, eyes soft, tail wagging once. Elijah reached over and scratched behind his ears. "You stopped running the moment you climbed on my boat, didn't you?" Rex licked his hand, then rested his chin on Elijah's boot. It was quiet for a long time. No traffic, no radio, just the crackling of the small fire pit and the hum of insects in the trees. Then Elijah heard the soft sound of tires on gravel. He stood, instinct pulling him upright. Rex did too, ears alert but calm. A familiar pickup came into view. It was her, the military vet who'd visited before. She stepped out slowly, hands visible, a soft smile on her face. "I figured I owed you both something," she said, holding up a sealed envelope. Elijah met her halfway down the path. "What is it?" "Freedom," she replied, handing it to him. "Official papers. Declassified. Rex has been marked retired. You're his registered caretaker. No one's coming after him now." Elijah opened the envelope and read the stamp. Discharged. Retired. K9 A4201. Rex. He felt a weight lift from his shoulders. One he hadn't even realized he was still carrying. "You didn't have to do this," he said. She smiled. "I wanted to. Some of us still believe dogs like him deserve more than a number and a mission." She knelt, held her hand out. Rex approached, sniffed her fingers, and gently nudged her palm. "Be good, soldier," she whispered, brushing his neck. "You've earned it." When she drove off, Elijah stood at the edge of the woods for a long time, the letter still in his hand. The sky above him was wide, endless, and for once, it didn't feel like something to fear. He turned to Rex. "You're not K9 A4201 anymore, you're just Rex." The dog gave a short bark, then jogged ahead toward the lake trail, tail wagging like a flag. And Elijah followed. That night, by the fire, as the moon rose full and high, Elijah spoke softly, mostly to himself, but also to the dung lying by his feet. "You came out of the ocean like a ghost. I thought I was saving you that day, but maybe you were saving me." Rex lifted his head, looked at him. Funny how two broken things can make each other whole. The wind rustled through the trees like a whisper of agreement. And so they stayed. Not as man and dog, not as soldier and handler, but as something deeper. Survivors. Brothers. Home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share it with someone who believes in second chances and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Because sometimes all it takes is one moment of courage to change two lives forever.